My name is Angus McDougall, and my wife is Margaret Sullivan McDougall. She prefers to be called Maggie. I come from Scotland, and she comes from Ireland. Of course, that should have been my first hint that we weren't a good match, but dang, I fell head over heels for her the moment I saw her beautiful blonde hair, green eyes, and amazing body. We first met a decade ago when I had just left the army and started college with her. She was 18, and I was 22. I was studying culinary arts thanks to the GI Bill, while she was pursuing an accounting degree. Somehow we clicked, probably because she loved chocolate, and I dreamed of making all kinds of chocolate treats. My mom adored chocolate, and it was always in high demand. While most chocolate businesses thrive during Christmas, my shop stays busy year-round, especially during Valentine's Day, Easter, and even Independence Day. Valentine's Day rivals Christmas in terms of chocolate sales, and my shop does even better during that time. But I really dislike my first name, Angus. Seriously, Mom? Did you have to pick Angus? I go by Mac to everyone. Nobody calls me Angus, not even my wife. Well, except for my parents when they're mad at me. Otherwise, it's always Mac. Maggie had just informed me that we needed to have a serious conversation. Instantly, I felt uneasy, as every guy knows what those 4 words typically imply when said together. It's usually a precursor to bad news, like a breakup or divorce. So, with a sinking feeling, I took a seat and looked at her, sensing that my world was about to shatter. We'd been together for 10 years, happily married for 8 of those. Well, at least I had been happy. I assumed Maggie had been too. As I sat there, I pondered the possible reasons for her impending revelation. Was it about our bed life? Unlikely. We were intimate regularly, having marathon sessions 4 or 5 times a week, and she always seemed satisfied. Money problems? Doubtful. I had a 6-figure income, nearly $250,000 after all expenses, including payroll, taxes, and overhead. Financially, we were more than comfortable, earning close to $375,000 combined annually. Could it be that she no longer loved me? Not from my side. I loved her deeply. But had she stopped loving me somewhere along the way? Just a week ago, we were discussing starting a family. Interrupting my thoughts, she slid a dreaded manila envelope across the table. Maggie, please confirm this isn't what I suspect it is. I glanced at her, but her expression revealed nothing. I'm sorry, Mac, she said softly, her voice filled with regret. I should have talked to you sooner, but I want a divorce. Why? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. It's complicated, she replied, avoiding my gaze. You found someone else, I stated more matter-of-factly than I felt. Surprisingly, I didn't explode in anger. Yes, she admitted, almost in a whisper. For how long? I inquired, my disbelief growing. God, what's happening to me? I should have been furious, pacing and shouting at her, but instead, I felt numb. 8 months, she confessed, her voice barely audible. 8 months, I echoed, trying to process the betrayal. You've been cheating on me for 8 months, and this is how I find out? I sighed, resigned. I guess you'll take everything in court. Since California doesn't favor alienation of affection, I don't have much recourse. No, Mac, she said softly, shaking her head. Your business is yours. The house is mine, inherited from my grandparents, but I'll give you a few days to move out. Once you've found your own place, I'll be asking for some minimal alimony until I marry again. It won't break the bank, though. I sighed heavily. Do I know him? I asked after a pause. If you lay a finger on him, you'll end up behind bars, she stated unnecessarily. I wanted to confront him, but risking my business wasn't worth it. I get it, but I think I deserve to know who's been screwing me over for the past 8 months, I said, shrugging. Reginald Pennington, she replied, keeping her head held high. Son of a gun, I muttered. That revelation was bombshell number 2. I despised him even before this. Now I was furious. I closed my eyes, trying to calm down. Reginald Pennington, blonde, blue-eyed, filthy rich from old money, and outrageously snobbish with a streak of bigotry. I'd warned Maggie about him after a dinner where we discussed charity work together. She brushed off my concerns, thinking he was harmless. Yeah, right. Harmless like a rattlesnake. I'd first met him at a charity event in our community, and even then, I didn't like how he looked at Maggie. He regarded me with disdain, and her with blatant desire. Barely keeping my anger in check, I finally met Maggie's gaze again. Well, I guess there's not much I can do about it now, I said, trying to appear indifferent. "I wish things hadn't come to this, Mac," she said, her smile bittersweet, a facade I could see right through. She was just trying to soothe my pain, but I saw right through it. "That's not true, Mac," I replied calmly, my mind already plotting. "But whatever. I won't argue the divorce if that's what you want," I continued. "I'll review the papers with my lawyer before signing," I added, and she nodded in understanding. "I wouldn't expect anything less, Mac," she said. "Just so you know, it's not about anything you did or didn't do. Reginald and I have a deep connection. I still love you, but I'm in love with him," she explained, apologizing for the situation. What a load of nonsense. She was in love with his wealth. His family was loaded. At a charity ball we attended, he got too close to Maggie while dancing, and I noticed him adjusting himself afterward. I knew he couldn't satisfy her like I could. I almost laughed when I saw his excitement under his tight pants, but I held back, not wanting to cause a scene yet. "I'm sorry too," I replied instead. After our talk, she handed me the manila envelope. "You'll be served officially in the morning, Mac," she informed me. "We'll meet with my lawyer at Tim's office. This is just a preview of what I want from the settlement," she added. Tim Grayson, my childhood friend and longtime lawyer, handled all my legal matters, including my chocolate factory. "You know what? Drop the alimony, and we have a deal," I suggested, hoping she'd agree. She seemed to consider it. If she agreed, maybe I wouldn't go through with the plan I was already forming. "No, Mac, I need something out of this. After all, I wasted 10 years of my life with you," she replied firmly. Oh, hell no. That statement, that our entire marriage, as well as our time together while dating and engaged, had been a waste of her time, really got to me. I glanced at the proposed alimony and raised an eyebrow. She wanted $2,200 a month for 2 years, or until she remarried. That was about half of what I made monthly after expenses and paying my workers. I could manage it, considering my savings. I acted like I needed to think it over. "Fine, I guess it'll be worth it," I said, shrugging. "I'm packing up now. I'm leaving tonight," I declared, and that's what I did. I packed my clothes, toiletries, and my extensive music CD collection, which ranged from Marty Robbins to Metallica to Mozart, even including some Sir Mix-a-Lot. I loaded everything into my 1968 Mustang Fastback 390 GT and hit the road. Within an hour, I was on the phone with Kat. "Hey, Mac, what's up?" she answered. "Kat, I just got kicked out, and I'm getting served divorce papers at Tim's office tomorrow. Maggie thinks she's trading up," I said bitterly. "Damn, seriously?" Kat sounded surprised. "Yep, I'll stay at the Holiday Inn until I find a place," I replied. "No way. Get over to my place right now, Mr. Man," she insisted, in her no-nonsense way. "All right, yes, ma'am," I chuckled, unable to resist her command. "Good. See you soon," she said before ending the call. I smiled and shook my head. Katrina Monroe is the manager at my chocolate factory. She resembles Aisha Tyler, but younger. Just as tall, standing at 6 feet. We all call her Kat, and she doesn't mind. Her boyfriend, Darius Jackson, plays guitar in a rock band, which makes him cool in my book. He's on a road trip now, and won't be back until next week. That gives me a few nights at Kat's place in her guest room until he returns. Heck, Darius is cool with me, so I might stay longer. But no, I need to find my own place. I could probably buy a house outright with what I have in the bank, but the community property split hasn't happened yet. Darn, I'll likely have to rent an apartment for a while before I can afford my own house again. My thoughts are interrupted as I realize I'm near Kat's place. Her boyfriend only stays there sometimes, but he's been pushing her to move in with him in L.A. Kat won't budge yet, though. She wants a full commitment from him first, like a ring-on-finger commitment. So here I am, 32 years old, still in good shape, already a millionaire, but dumped and wiped out by the woman I married, my soon-to-be ex-wife, the cheating gold digger. I pull into Kat's driveway and park next to her little Ford Fusion. That car looks tiny compared to my Bullet. I smirk as I rev the engine one more time before shutting down the big V8. As I open the trunk and grab my suitcase, Kat comes out wearing Daisy Dukes and a tank top. I catch my breath as I admire her full breasts straining against the tank top, her long silky legs, and her gorgeous round behind. I quickly pushed those thoughts aside. Closing the trunk, I walked towards Kat, who let me in without saying a word. The expression on her face showed disbelief mixed with other emotions. I think I was still in shock at that moment. Yes, shock was the only thing keeping me going. But as soon as I stepped inside, I dropped the suitcase and fell to my knees. The weight of what had happened finally hit me. I had kept it all inside, but now it poured out of me in tears. I sobbed uncontrollably, and Kat wrapped her arms around me. Her presence kept me anchored, preventing me from completely withdrawing into myself. "Shh, it's okay now. You'll be all right, Mac," she said soothingly. "No, I won't," I replied, wallowing in self-pity. She hugged me tighter, offering comfort and support. With her help, I got to my feet, and we walked, or rather, she walked while I stumbled, to the living room and collapsed on her large leather couch. Kat checked her phone and found a video of Darius kissing another girl, which was going viral. "You've got to be kidding me," she exclaimed, shocked and angry as she stared at her phone. I looked too, and saw Darius kissing another woman passionately. "Is there something in the water?" I mused, as I watched Kat's relationship unravel along with my marriage. "Must be some cheating epidemic," she snarled. I glanced at her, seeing the anger in her eyes, especially at the fact that Darius was with a white woman. "That jerk? He claimed he wasn't into white women." I listened to Kat vent about him for about 20 minutes. Then she looked at me and started crying herself. I returned the favor from earlier, holding her as she let it all out. When she finished crying, she looked at me with tired red eyes that looked a lot like mine. "Look at us, huh? 2 peas in a pod," she said with a sad laugh, and I smiled as a few tears rolled down my face too. "Well, at least Maggie did it to me in private," I shrugged. "That jerk did it on national television." "I'm so sorry, Kat," I said. "Not your fault, buddy," she replied, hugging me tightly, then reaching for her cell phone. "Excuse me while I call that cheater and give him a piece of my mind." "No problem," I nodded as she pressed his speed dial button. "Hey, Darius. Yeah, we saw the video. Mac came over since his cheating wife is divorcing him and kicked him out. No, he's going to be staying with me for a few days, just until he can find his own place. No, and that brings me to why I'm calling you. I saw you fooling around with that woman." She paused and listened for a few seconds, rolling her eyes. She silently signaled me to listen in as she put it on speakerphone. "But baby, I'm just having fun. You know I have needs. She doesn't mean anything to me. I just need some action on the side while I'm on the road. You understand?" he whined and pleaded. That idiot didn't deserve to be in the band anymore, as far as I was concerned. "Well, Darius, we're through now," she said firmly. "I'll have your stuff sent back to your place in L.A. I don't want any contact with you, got it?" "But baby," he pleaded, sounding desperate. "Nah, you lost the right to call me that when you kissed that woman on TV. I don't tolerate that. We're over," she declared firmly. "Dione," she finished. "If I'm being clear, get that through your head right now. Goodbye, Darius. I hope she was worth it." Before he could say more, Kat ended the call and blocked his number. She looked at me with a defiant smirk. "Well, that settles it. 0 tolerance." I nodded. "Agreed, Kat. Cheaters don't deserve second chances." "So, what's she asking for in the divorce? Don't tell me she's trying to take you for everything you've got. I swear I'll knock some sense into her." Kat always had a way with words, and I found myself grinning at her remark. Oddly enough, no, she's asking for $2,200 a month in alimony, probably so I won't stand in the way of her remarrying ASAP. But aside from that, the settlement she's proposing is pretty fair, I replied with a shrug. I had cried enough, and had reached the acceptance stage of the divorce process. Well, acceptance was a bit far off. I wanted revenge, and now that I was thinking clearly, my plan was forming in my head. It would depend on a few factors like who was catering their wedding. But the more I thought about it, the more satisfying it seemed. "So, she's serious about this guy? Did she tell you who it is?" Kat inquired. "Yeah, and you won't believe it. It's Reginald Pennington," I said with a smirk. Kat's eyes widened. "Damn, I never would have thought Maggie was after money." "Me neither until now. Seems like she fooled everyone," I shrugged. "Her parents never approved of me, so I'm pretty sure they influenced her decision, at least a bit. I was never good enough for their precious daughter." "All right, I gotta admit, I let my bitterness slip out for a moment there. Well, damn, Em, you caught me. I can see you're cooking up something, Mac. What's on your mind?" Kat always had a knack for sensing when I was deep in thought. She witnessed it plenty at work whenever I had to troubleshoot an issue in the shop or factory. I'm thinking revenge on a grand scale. I grinned calmly as I confided in her. Just trust me, it'll leave a lasting mark on them. Okay, I'm almost afraid to ask, but what's your plan so far? Kat was now chuckling. I laid out the basics for her, and she burst into laughter. You're one crazy dude, she giggled, tears streaming down her face. All right, let's figure out how to pull this off. And so we did. We stayed up, sipping beers and strategizing for when the wedding would happen. Considering I wasn't contesting the divorce, we estimated they'd tie the knot within 3 months, maybe 6 at most. We'd be prepared, and if I could maintain civility with Maggie, and yes, even Reginald, I might score an invite without crashing the party. By the time I settled my suitcase and bag in the guest room, it was well past midnight. I told Kat I'd be late to the shop since I had to see Tim to sign the divorce papers in the morning, and she understood. She assured me she'd hold down the fort until I arrived, or I could take the day off if needed. I slept really well last night. Maybe it was the beer we drank, just enough to relax. Or maybe it was the devious plan I came up with to make Reginald regret and Maggie's wedding unforgettable. Either way, I was pleased with our scheme. I was up early with a grin on my face. The smell of bacon and eggs cooking on the stove greeted me, waking me up even more. Kat had a fresh pot of coffee brewing too, which was even better. I couldn't recall the last time Maggie cooked me breakfast, but here was Kat doing it, and we were just roommates for now. After a shower, I threw on a t-shirt and jeans since I didn't feel like going into the shop after meeting Tim. I joined Kat in the kitchen. Morning, Kat, I greeted her with a smile as I sat down at her kitchen counter. Good morning, sunshine, she replied with a bright smile. You're looking a lot better this morning than when you showed up last night. Thanks to you and beer, I said, giving her a nod which earned me a laugh. Kat's laughter is contagious, so I couldn't help but laugh along. Here's some eggs and bacon for you, hun. Are you heading to work after seeing Tim? She placed a plate of food and a coffee mug in front of me. Thanks, Kat. Nah, I think I'll take the day off. I'm not sure how I'll feel after meeting Maggie and her lawyer to sign the papers. I shrugged. But hey, I'll take you out for lunch later and fill you in on what went down. Kat nodded. You better, Mac. Damn, I'm glad I'm not going with you, she chuckled. If I ever ran into that woman, I'd be tempted to give her a good smack. That's why I appreciate you so much, sweetheart. I flashed a grin. You're the most trustworthy person I know. Ah, I love you too, boss, she said with a sweet smile as I got up and hugged her. Kat was shorter than me, so she fit snugly against me as we shared a comforting embrace. Hey, both our exes were cheating. It's good to see you're holding up too, I remarked, as I squeezed her gently before letting go. Thankfully, they weren't cheating with each other. That would have been too cliché, I added, and she let out a snort of laughter, which made me chuckle. You're spot on, Mac. A big coincidence indeed, which makes that cheating epidemic theory sound even more plausible. Ah, you and your conspiracy theories, I teased, rolling my eyes but giving her a friendly smile. Hey, the truth is out there, I said with a smirk, and Kat gave me a playful, spooky look. After we tidied up and loaded the dishwasher, she handed me a spare key to her place. This was meant for Darius, but I think you might need it more right now, she said with a smile. Thanks, Kat, I said gratefully, kissing her cheek and hugging her tightly. But don't worry, I'll find my own spot in a few days and I'll be out of your hair. No rush, Mac. I'd rather have you around where I can keep an eye on you than out there on your own. I've seen how tough it was for my dad when my mom left. I'm not letting you go through that alone, she said earnestly. All right, Mom, I teased, and she playfully swatted my shoulder with a smirk. I'd heard about what went down with her mom, who struggled with mental health issues. While she didn't cheat on Kat's dad, her personality problems and mental health struggles led to alcohol obsession and eventually their divorce. I didn't know all the specifics, but it wasn't as messy as my own situation. However, her dad took it pretty hard. To give you some context on our friendship, Kat and I have known each other for 20 years now. She's 2 years older than me and kind of looked out for me when we were kids. Back then, I was smaller than the other boys and often got picked on. Kat, being taller and stronger than most, stood up for me, and nobody dared to mess with her. But she didn't just react to situations. She also taught me how to stand up for myself and fight back when necessary. She learned to take care of herself early on. By the time we were teenagers, I had finally grown enough to be slightly taller than her. Just barely, though. I hit my last growth spurt during sophomore year of high school, while Kat had already stopped growing. She's 6 feet tall and I'm 6 feet 1 inch, and we've been that way ever since. We've both filled out since our skinny days, but we're still in good shape. She was a hurdler on the track team, and I played baseball. While Kat was skilled enough to earn a scholarship to USC, I didn't make the cut for a baseball scholarship. So I ended up joining the Army and later used my GI Bill benefits to pursue higher education. When I opened the chocolate shop before marrying Maggie, Ken applied for the manager position. With her MBA, I hired her quickly. In the beginning, I couldn't pay her much, but once our reputation grew, business boomed. With a great team, Kat stood out as the best. After a year, I left her in charge for our delayed honeymoon. She kept things running smoothly, and by the end of the first year, we were on track to pay off the bank loan and give everyone a raise. By the third year, the shop expanded into a small factory with a kitchen. We secured contracts for cocoa beans and introduced exotic blends. By our fifth year, we were filling special candy orders across California, but I refused to franchise. Despite lucrative offers to buy the company, my employees and I declined. They preferred working for me, so I kept it small with 20 employees, focusing on enjoying our work while making money. This decision didn't sit well with Maggie's father, who wanted to expand the business. Politely but firmly, I rejected his proposal, expressing my desire to maintain a family-like atmosphere. He criticized my decision, insisting expansion was the only path to big profits. I defended my stance, emphasizing that I was already making good money and didn't want to become greedy like him. I firmly and directly stated that I was already making a significant amount of money, but I didn't want to become as greedy as him. I casually wondered what Maggie's family would think of her cheating on me with, then divorcing me for, Reginald Pennington, and realized I didn't care, but they probably approved. Old money tends to attract old money, and while the Sullivans weren't as wealthy as the Penningtons, they still belonged to old money. Forget it. Kat and I left that morning after breakfast. She decided not to work while I went to see Tim at his office. When I arrived, Maggie hadn't shown up yet, so we chatted until she arrived. When she walked in, Tim visibly tensed. I could tell from his body language that Maggie and her lawyer weren't the only ones present. I turned around, and sure enough, there was little Dickie Pennington himself. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to wipe the self-satisfied smirk off his face. Instead, I ignored his extended handshake and looked at Maggie. "Well, let's just get this over with," I said with a shrug. Tim reviewed the proposed division of assets. Since my business wasn't funded by her or her family's money, and the house was a gift from her parents after her grandparents passed away, they weren't considered community property and remained ours. My Mustang belonged to me, and I'd been fixing it up since high school. Tim surprised me with a question about my reason for divorcing his client to marry Reginald Pennington. It caught Maggie off guard, and she hesitated to answer. Tim pressed for a straightforward response. Maggie's lawyer, a wannabe in all red, whispered something to her, and she softly admitted to the plan, looking ashamed. Tim didn't address her as Mrs. McDougal, and he inquired about the timing of the wedding plans. As they whispered among themselves, Tim leaned over and whispered to me about alimony, trying to help me avoid paying her anything. When they finished, Maggie confirmed the wedding plans would proceed soon after the divorce. Tim then revealed Reggie Boy's substantial wealth. He questioned why Maggie would ask for alimony from me when she could easily get money from Reggie. Maggie conferred with her lawyer, and Tim exchanged a quick grin with me. Gloria Jr. asked what I suggested as fair compensation, and I replied, "She can have all the furniture, not just her share." "I'm not bothered by that," I said with a shrug. They gathered in another huddle, speaking in quieter tones this time, before breaking and turning to Tim. "Agreed," stated the lawyer. And so, it was settled. I didn't have to pay alimony, but I also didn't receive any furniture. Gloria Jr. made the necessary adjustments to the divorce papers, which we all signed, except Snake Boy. The filing would happen later that day, once the lawyer left. On my way back to my car, Maggie and her companion approached me. "Angus, old boy, hope there's no hard feelings," he said, extending his hand for a shake. I took his hand and squeezed it firmly, causing him pain. "Call me Angus again, Reginald, and I'll make your life miserable. To you, I'm Mr. McDougal. Got it?" I released his hand, and he looked genuinely fearful. "Yes, Mr. Mac. McDougal, please let me go," he pleaded. I let go, warning him it was for calling me Angus. As for Maggie, I held no grudges. I smiled, walked away, feeling relieved. Getting out of alimony felt like a win. "Oh, one more thing." I turned back to them as Maggie helped her companion to his feet. "Before I go, I need my grandma's engagement ring back," I stated, extending my hand. Maggie stared at me as if I had just landed from Mars. Then she removed both the engagement ring and the wedding band and handed them over to me. "Thanks," I said with a smile, pocketing both rings before heading back to my car. I revved up the powerful V8 engine and shifted into gear, releasing the clutch and hitting the gas. The tires screeched as I peeled out of the parking lot, leaving a trail of rubber on the asphalt and smoke in the air. It wasn't something I did often, but I wanted to send a strong message to the lovebirds. Glancing in my rearview mirror, I saw the jerk standing there, still nursing his right hand. I smirked happily as I drove towards the shop. When I arrived, Kat and everyone else greeted me warmly. They hugged me, shook my hand, and offered their condolences. I thanked them all and jokingly told them to get back to work, appreciating their efforts to lift my spirits. Despite the legal fees and the loss of some furniture, I felt pretty good. "Come on, Kat," I said. "Let's grab lunch." We rode in Bullet, and Kat enjoyed the experience. She could feel the power of the engine and the excitement it exuded. Over lunch, we laughed and shared stories, strengthening our bond as friends who had both recently experienced betrayal. "I still can't believe I had no clue she was cheating on me," I admitted, expressing my frustration at my own ignorance regarding Maggie's affair. "I must have been really naive." "No, Mac, you were in love. Love can blind us, you know," Kat said, smiling as she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I couldn't help but smile back. "Thanks, Kat," I replied, returning the squeeze, showing her how much I valued her support, both at work and in my personal life. She was more than just my office manager and friend. She had become someone I relied on for a long time, from back in school when I was the small kid, to now, as a man trying to make my business thrive. She had always been there. "You never have to thank me, Mac. A nice bonus at the end of the year is thanks enough," she said with a grin, which made me chuckle. "Consider it done," I replied, meeting her gaze with my own. She looked away first, and I noticed a faint blush on her face. It caught me off guard, but I quickly regained my composure, despite feeling a stirring of attraction. I reminded myself that she was my friend and had just gone through a tough time. In all the years of our friendship, I had never seen Kat in that way before. I had always viewed her as a friend, albeit a very attractive one. Sure, I couldn't help but notice her beauty, like when I saw her the previous night at her house. But that was just a natural reaction. This felt different. I realized I wasn't prepared for it, so we swiftly changed the subject. After we finished eating, I drove Kat back to the shop and left her there. She said she'd meet me at home, so I headed to the bluffs and stared out at the Pacific. Looking at my left hand, I took off my ring, which had been there for 8 years. I also took out Maggie's wedding band from my pocket. Just seeing them made me feel sick. Then, I retrieved my grandma's engagement ring and held all three together. Putting the engagement ring back in my pocket, I threw the wedding bands as hard as I could into the ocean. They glimmered in the sunlight as they sailed over the bluffs and into the crashing waves below. It felt symbolic to me. My marriage was over, and this was my way of saying goodbye. Even though the divorce process wasn't finished yet, I needed to do this for my own peace of mind, to move forward. But just because I was ending my marriage didn't mean I was giving up on my plan for revenge against Maggie and Reggie. I remembered a line from a song, Violence and Bloodshed, that said, "Payback's a witch, and I'm paying all." I smiled, imagining the music playing in my head, fueling my determination. Reggie was going to pay for stealing my wife, and Maggie was going to pay for being a gold digger. Some might call me vindictive or old-fashioned, but to them I say, to hell with you. Walk in my shoes for 20 miles, then judge me. 3 months later, everything was settled. Our joint accounts were divided equally. During that time, Kat and I lived together as roommates and got along great. No one at work cared about our living situation. The big surprise came when we found wedding invitations in the mail one night. Maggie wasn't joking. They planned to wed a month after the divorce was finalized. I grinned at Kat, and she grinned back. "All right, it's go time," I said. I mentioned to Evely as we headed to Costco that finding the wedding caterer was a breeze. He had shown interest in working with us a few months back, but it fell through. I decided to give him another shot and negotiated the deal myself this time. What cracked me up was that Maggie planned to wear white, and so did Reggie Boy in his Navy dress whites. He'd been a naval aviator during the early days of the war, while I served in Captain Drake's Alpha team. It seemed the guy couldn't even opt for a regular black tux. A couple of nights before the wedding, I visited the caterer and swapped out the chocolate cake mix with my own special blend. I smirked mischievously as I added the secret ingredient, which wasn't poison, just something to make the wedding unforgettable. My actions might resemble a high school prank, but I needed to get even after being blindsided with divorce papers. Though Maggie had been relatively fair in the divorce, I was left with a broken heart, and they were going to pay for it. I kept Kat informed, and she laughed when I told her about Operation Mudflap. The invitation included the reception, where the real fun would begin. On the wedding morning, Kat and I showered separately, but simultaneously. Though we had grown closer over the past months, we were cautious about complicating our friendship. I was relieved when I saw her in a stunning emerald green dress that highlighted her curves perfectly. The fabric seemed to embrace her, unwilling to let go. Her hair was styled in a shoulder-length cut that framed her beautiful face just right. Her full, lush lips were painted in a seductive shade of red, and her green eyeshadow perfectly matched her dress. She wore 1-inch pumps, which made her the same height as me. Her toned calves were visible, and the dress showcased them nicely. Her ample bust was barely contained by the top of her dress, and as she spun around, I caught a glimpse of her caramel-colored back. "Wow, you look stunning," I managed to say finally. She flashed a perfect smile. "Thanks, Mac. You're looking pretty sharp yourself." I felt myself blush at the compliment. "Thanks, Kat," I replied, as we headed out the door. We drove to the church, and ironically, Billy Idol's White Wedding was playing on the radio. As Bullet pulled into the parking lot, all eyes turned to us, announcing our arrival. Everyone at the wedding, except for us, seemed to be from old money. This was shaping up to be even more entertaining than I had expected. We showed our invitations to the guy at the door, though calling him a bouncer might be too generous. He seemed to be one of Reggie Boy's security guys, accompanying him to public events. It seemed the Penningtons had made some enemies over the years with their business practices, hence the need for security. That didn't surprise me one bit. Reggie Boy's family had a reputation for their do unto others before they do it to you approach. Their version of the golden rule might as well be, he who has the gold makes the rules. And judging by the disdainful looks Kat and I were receiving from the elitist crowd, I felt even more confident about what was going to go down today. As we took our seats in the pew, I leaned over and whispered in Kat's ear, "Make sure to steer clear of any chocolate treats at the reception." She let out a soft laugh at that and quickly kissed me on the cheek. The ceremony dragged on, typical Catholic wedding stuff. I struggled to stay awake several times, but it wasn't a big deal. Reggie did look pretty sharp in his Navy uniform, though, another reason to despise the guy. He used to be in the Navy before joining his family's business. His Annapolis-class ring sparkled as he awaited Maggie's entrance. Then, as the wedding march started playing, she made her way down the aisle with her snobbish father. I remembered our own wedding, and how her father had glared at me the whole time. Now, though, he was grinning proudly, happy that his daughter was marrying into a suitable family. I wanted to punch the guy in the face, but I held back. I knew I'd get my revenge at the reception, and so it went. I won't bore you with the details of the vows she probably didn't mean the first time around, or the exchanging of rings that she tarnished with her affair with that jerk, or anything else for that matter. Then came my turn to act. I congratulated them both with such finesse that I could have won Oscars, Emmys, Tonys, and Golden Globes all at once. Kat would have won for Best Actress, considering how she took Maggie's betrayal as a betrayal of everyone who worked for me and loved her like a sister. Reggie rubbed it in with his Angus old boy line. "I hope there are no hard feelings," he said. I resisted the urge to pummel him into the ground and remodel his face. Instead, I replied, "You're right. The better man did win." Then, to everyone's surprise, I grabbed Kat and kissed her passionately. Kat hesitated for a moment, then returned my kiss with eagerness. Right there, In front of Reggie and Maggie, I sealed my claim on Kat with a passionate kiss. That first kiss was incredible. Everything else faded away for a moment as our tongues intertwined and danced slowly, her arms wrapping around my neck while her fingers tangled in my hair. After breaking the kiss, Kat glanced at Reggie and Maggie. "Yep, the best man definitely won," she said with a wink, leaving the newlyweds stunned. We exchanged a grin as we took our seats, enjoying some delicious lobster for dinner. Then came the highlight of the evening as the wedding cake was brought out. Reggie and Maggie went through the traditional cutting of the cake and the playful smashing of cake in each other's faces. Everyone laughed, and guests lined up to grab a slice of cake. We decided to wait until the end of the line for a good view of the chaos to come, and sure enough, chaos erupted as soon as we reached the cake. It all started with an unexpected fart from the bride, a loud one that echoed across the hall. Then the groom followed suit with his own thunderous fart. I loudly excused them, earning chuckles from the snobbish crowd around us. But the worst was yet to come for the couple. Maggie's face turned to horror as she let out a gurgling sound, followed by an unpleasant odor. Reginald's face twisted in disgust as he caught a whiff of the stench, then emitted a similar gurgling noise from his rear. They exchanged horrified looks as more guests joined in with their own bodily sounds. Soon the couple was sprinting for the restrooms, leaving behind a trail of embarrassment. Brown fluid could be seen dripping from beneath Maggie's dress, while Reggie attempted to conceal a growing stain on the back of his pants. They made a frantic dash for the restroom, followed by other guests who realized they had also soiled themselves. Kat and I left quietly, trying to stifle our laughter, but we couldn't hold it in once we were in the car. Tears were streaming down our faces as we laughed so hard that it felt like our guts would burst. "Oh my God, Mac," Kat said between fits of laughter, clutching her stomach. I was laughing just as hard. "Do you think I went overboard?" I asked amid the laughter and tears. Kat laughed again. "Well, the boxes at Costco said it was effective, but warned not to use too much." Our laughter finally subsided a bit, and Kat asked incredulously, "How many boxes did you pour into the cake mix?" "All of them," I replied with a serene smile, prompting Kat to burst into laughter again. I had added powdered chocolate-flavored laxative to the cake mix intended for the Pennington wedding. Most of the cake and cupcakes were laced with laxative since I replaced much of the cake mix with the powdered laxative. I also mixed some with the regular cake mix to balance it out, but I didn't expect it to take effect so quickly. That was just the beginning. Then I dealt with the caterer. I pretended to negotiate a contract with him for the chocolate from my factory. He had contacted me earlier, and I had delayed responding. I explained that we had been experiencing some delays due to illnesses among my team, but now that we were back on track, I could provide him with samples. He seemed eager, thinking I would fulfill his desires. During the tour, he proudly mentioned catering the Pennington wedding, unaware that the bride was my deceitful ex-wife. I played nice, but as soon as he dismissed his staff for the day and retreated to his office after shaking my hand, I knew it was time to act. He promised to prepare the contract paperwork and inform me and Tim once it was ready. However, it seemed like he completely forgot about the contract in the days following the wedding. Once everyone had left for the day, I headed to the kitchen's back door, propped it open, and brought my car around. I replaced the powdered cake mix with the powdered chocolate laxative and swiftly left. I ensured the kitchen door was securely closed and made sure not to leave any boxes behind, following the principle taught by Captain Drake. Never leave a trace. He's a stand-up guy. The last I heard, he left his military position and became a history professor at UCLA. By the day of the wedding, any evidence tying me to the laxative-infused cake had vanished. Only Kat and I were aware of the plan, and she kept it under wraps. When Kat and I returned home, she looked at me seriously. "Mac, about that kiss earlier," she began. "Kat, I know I crossed a line, but you looked stunning and I couldn't resist," I confessed. She gently placed a finger on my lips. "Let me finish. That kiss earlier was incredible," she said. "You're a good man and quite impressive for a white guy. What I'm trying to say is, I think we could be great together." She blushed slightly, and I leaned in for another kiss. Our lips met, and we kissed tenderly, feeling like we had been missing out on something special for a long time. After our kiss, we gazed into each other's eyes. "I think we could be great together too," I said with a smile, and she smiled back. Once inside, we kissed slowly again, I gently removed the straps of her dress as we kissed. We made love, and it was truly amazing. Some may wonder why I orchestrated the caterer's setup as I did. The issue arose when Sal, the owner, made advances toward Kat during her initial negotiations with him when he first expressed interest in working with us. After Kat firmly rejected his advances, she advised against doing business with him. However, when they were chosen as the caterers for the Pennington wedding, I saw an opportunity to address two issues at once. The fallout from the Brown wedding, as the media called it, was immediate. News outlets covered the event extensively the next day, capturing images and videos of the bride, groom, and guests rushing to the toilets. I invited all the folks from the shop to Kat's house to watch the chaos unfold. Although we weren't shown in any of the scenes, everyone knew we had been present. We laughed so hard, tears streamed down our faces as the high society guests scrambled to handle the embarrassing. The only folks I felt bad for were the janitors who had to clean up that mess afterward. About a week after the disastrous wedding, the cops came by asking questions. Kat and I had gone to the wedding, but we both said we left when things got messy because we were worried about getting sick. We kept straight faces during our interviews and burst out laughing only after the detectives left. We never heard from them again. Reggie Boy sued the caterer, but the caterer skipped town instead of paying up. Last we heard, he fled to Italy, his home country. Not sure what happened to him after that. Reginald Pennington IV was caught in bed with another man's wife less than a year after the wedding. Who caught him? The woman's husband, and he wasn't too kind to Reggie Boy. He called Maggie, and she had some choice words for Reggie when she arrived at the offended husband's house. Maggie showed up on our doorstep shortly after that. At least Reggie ended up losing a testicle in the fight that ensued. It turned out that while she had no qualms about cheating herself, she wouldn't tolerate her husband cheating on her. A bit of a double standard, don't you think? Yes, Kat and I moved into a bigger place since her small 2-bedroom wasn't quite cutting it. Our new home was a 4-bedroom ranch style, and I had it almost paid off by the end of the first year. It seemed Reggie Boy had made Maggie sign a prenup, stating that if she filed for divorce for any reason, she'd leave with only what she brought into the marriage. She still had her $125,000 a year job, but that was it. No billions for Maggie Sullivan. It was late the following year when we heard a knock on the door. Kat was 4 months pregnant, so I gave her a quick kiss and went to answer the door myself. I opened it to find a tearful Maggie. "What do you want, Maggie?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm sorry, Mac. So sorry for everything," she sobbed. "You were the one who wanted something better," I said with a shrug. "What happened?" I asked. "I caught Reginald cheating on me," she admitted, crying even harder. "Well, that's rough," I said sarcastically. "Mac, I'm really sorry," she said, cutting herself off as she noticed Kat, who was pregnant, walking up behind me. "Baby, who is it?" Kat asked as she joined me. She smiled at Maggie. "It's Maggie, and she's leaving," I said as I closed the door on my ex's face. I locked the door and embraced Kat. "She's the past. You're my future. I love you, sweetheart." "Aw, I love you too, baby," she said as she kissed me. Kat and I eloped shortly after finding out she was pregnant. It was a small civil ceremony, her idea, and we became husband and wife. She's still my manager at the shop, and she's still one of my best friends. I love my wife.